April 19th, 1995. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 8:59 a.m. On a Wednesday morning began like any other. The streets were alive with traffic. Workers streamed into offices, and children were being dropped off at daycare. Inside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, employees were settling into their desks, phones were ringing, and the hum of printers filled the air. At 9:02 a.m., that ordinary day was ripped apart. A white Ryder rental truck parked just outside the building exploded with a thunderous force that shook the earth. A massive fireball engulfed the street as a 4,800-pound bomb, one of the most powerful ever detonated on U.S. soil, tore through the 9-story building. The explosion was so intense that it shattered windows across a 50-block radius. Cars flipped. Concrete rained down like deadly hail. Entire floors collapsed on top of each other like a house of cards. Screams echoed from the rubble. People staggered through smoke and dust, covered in blood and debris. The daycare on the second floor was gone, reduced to twisted metal and dust. Tiny shoes and toys lay scattered amid the wreckage. In the chaos, emergency sirens wailed as first responders raced toward the scene. Police officers, firefighters, and ordinary citizens clawed through debris with their bare hands, desperate to pull survivors from the ruins. In all, 168 people were killed, including 19 children, and over 680 were injured. It was the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. And within minutes, investigators knew this wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate, calculated attack. But who would do something so monstrous? And why? The answer would stun America. The bomber wasn't a foreign enemy. He was one of their own. And even as the dust settled, the man responsible was already speeding away from the crime scene, believing he had just sparked a revolution. Timothy McVeigh was born in 1968 in upstate New York. By most accounts, his childhood was unremarkable, quiet, even lonely. He loved science fiction, guns, and the U.S. Constitution. But beneath that ordinary surface, Timothy was deeply distrustful of government authority. After high school, McVeigh joined the U.S. Army and served in the Gulf War. He was a disciplined soldier, known for his marksmanship and dedication. But when he left the military in 1991, he struggled to find purpose. Civilian life felt dull and meaningless. He bounced from job to job, spent hours at gun shows, and devoured books about government conspiracies and anti-federalist ideology. One event in particular lit a fire inside him: the 1993 siege in Waco, Texas, where a federal raid on a religious compound ended in a deadly fire that killed more than 70 people. McVeigh watched the footage in horror and rage. To him, it was proof that the government had become tyrannical, and he vowed to make them pay. That anger grew over the next 2 years. He attended militia meetings, collected weapons, and scribbled anti-government rants in notebooks. He was no longer just angry. He was radicalized. McVeigh wasn't alone. During his travels on the gun show circuit, he reconnected with an old Army buddy, Terry Nichols. Like McVeigh, Nichols distrusted the government and believed a revolution was coming. Together, they began planning something that would shock the nation. They chose the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building for one reason: symbolism. It housed offices for the FBI, DEA, Secret Service, and other federal agencies. To McVeigh, it represented everything he hated about the federal government. The plan was chillingly simple. McVeigh and Nichols would build a massive bomb out of common agricultural fertilizer and fuel oil, ingredients that were cheap and easy to obtain. Then, they would pack it into a rented truck, park it outside the building, and detonate it during business hours for maximum casualties. For months, they gathered supplies. They purchased ammonium nitrate fertilizer, diesel fuel, and detonation cord from farm stores across the Midwest. They rented storage units and quietly assembled the bomb, mixing chemicals in barrels and testing detonators. Every step brought them closer to April 19th, the date McVeigh chose deliberately. It was the second anniversary of the Waco siege. In his mind, it was time for revenge. On April 16, 1995, McVeigh rented a Ryder truck under the alias Robert Kling. He and Nichols spent the next 2 days finalizing the bomb, loading it into the truck with care. On the morning of April 19th, McVeigh drove the truck south into Oklahoma City. He wore earplugs to protect himself from the blast and carried a pistol on his hip. As he approached the Murrah Building, he glanced at the daycare center on the second floor. He knew children would die. He kept driving. At 8:57 a.m., he parked the truck just outside the building's north entrance. He stepped out, locked the door, and walked away, calm and confident. 5 minutes later, 9:02 a.m., the bomb detonated. The blast killed 168 people, including federal workers, military veterans, Social Security recipients, and 19 children in the daycare. More than 300 buildings were damaged and over 10,000 windows shattered. The blast registered as a 3.0 earthquake on local seismographs. America was stunned. This wasn't a foreign attack. This was domestic terrorism, and it struck at the heart of the country. President Bill Clinton called it an attack on our country, on our children, and on our way of life. Within hours, the FBI launched one of the largest investigations in U.S. history. Agents combed through the blast site, collecting over 1,000 pieces of evidence. They traced fragments of the truck back to a Ryder rental facility in Junction City, Kansas. There, they found the name R. Obert Kling. They created a composite sketch and began canvassing the area. Witnesses remembered a man matching McVeigh's description renting the truck days earlier, but McVeigh had already vanished. Or so they thought. Just 90 minutes after the bombing, an Oklahoma Highway Patrol officer named Charlie Hanger pulled over a yellow Mercury Marquis near Perry, Oklahoma, about 80 miles north of the blast. The driver wasn't speeding, but he had no license plate. Hanger approached the car and found a young man in a t-shirt and windbreaker. The man calmly handed over a driver's license, Timothy McVeigh. Inside the car, the trooper spotted a loaded Glock pistol. McVeigh was arrested on a weapons charge. At the time, Hanger had no idea he had just captured the most wanted man in America. As the FBI pieced together the evidence, McVeigh's name quickly rose to the top of the suspect list. When agents learned he was already in custody, they moved fast. On April 21st, McVeigh was charged with the Oklahoma City bombing. News of his arrest stunned the nation. He wasn't a foreign operative or part of a vast network. He was a 27-year-old Army veteran, an American citizen who believed he was striking a blow against tyranny. But the investigation wasn't over. The FBI now turned its attention to McVeigh's accomplices. Terry Nichols was arrested and charged as a co-conspirator. Another friend, Michael Fortier, testified that McVeigh had told him about the plan months before the bombing. The evidence against McVeigh was overwhelming. Truck rental receipts, fertilizer purchases, eyewitness accounts, and forensic traces of the bomb's components. There was no doubt. He was guilty. In 1997, McVeigh went on trial in a federal courtroom in Denver, Colorado. The prosecution laid out a devastating case, showing how he built and detonated the bomb. Survivors testified about the horror of that morning. Rescue workers described pulling victims from the rubble. McVeigh showed little emotion. In fact, he called the deaths of the children collateral damage. After 23 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before finding him guilty on all 11 counts of murder and conspiracy. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. On June 11, 2001, Timothy McVeigh was executed at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. He showed no remorse and offered no final words beyond quoting a poem about defiance. Terry Nichols received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The bombing left scars that would never fully heal, not just on the survivors, but on the nation itself. but it also reshaped how the U.S. fought domestic terrorism. The FBI overhauled its intelligence systems, improved coordination between agencies, and began tracking extremist groups more aggressively. Laws were passed to strengthen counterterrorism tools and protect federal buildings. But as America rebuilt, one haunting question remained. How did a single man, once a soldier sworn to protect his country, become its greatest enemy? And could it happen again?